students, and welcome to this class in which I summarize Learning Unit 3, International Communication Media, Entertainment Broadcasting and Film. As you can see from the title of this learning unit, it covers two major forms of international entertainment media: international radio broadcasting, known as IRB, and film. The unit follows a communications triptych for the radio section: broadcaster, message, audience, and takes a chronological approach for film, tracing how it developed from the 1890s to the global industry it is today. Both sections are rich with facts that can be tested in both MCQs and in assignments. So pay close attention to names, dates, and key terms. To begin, the unit identifies 9 distinct types of international broadcasting, all of which operate mainly on shortwave transmissions. Now, you may wonder why we are still talking about this. Statistics are extremely interesting. A lot of people are still listening to radio, and even though it might not be the small little radio that you have next to your bed, it could be radio stations that, for example, broadcast via DSTV. So a lot of people are still listening to radio. The first type then is state-funded and controlled stations. This includes something like Voice of America, which is in big trouble at the moment due to the current US government, and also the BBC World Service. Type 2 is commercial services. These are privately owned international stations. Then we have religious stations. These are faith-based international broadcasters. Then we have domestic stations whose signals spill over into neighboring territory. For example, SABC signals can be heard in Swaziland, or Eswatini, I should say, Lesotho, and Botswana. Type 2 is pirate radio stations. These are broadcasters that do not have a license. Then we have clandestine radio. And these are operated usually by political dissident organizations. The best known example is Radio Marti, which broadcasts to Cuba from the USA. Another example is Radio Free Afghanistan. Then we have NGO and non-profit stations such as UN Radio and Radio for Peace International. Utility stations are not intended for the general public. They're generally used for shipping, aircraft, and weather. And then we have time signals that is used for navigation by mariners. The history of international radio broadcasting can be divided into 5 distinct periods. It's important that you know each one of these. So the first period is 1914 to 1933, which is the beginnings of IRB. Morse code was used in World War I. Russia used radio in 1916 to encourage German troops to mutiny. The first recorded use of voice broadcast was in 1923 when Germany chronicled the French occupation of the Rhineland, and Radio Moscow was formally established in 1929 specifically to explain the revolution and to attack capitalism. The Dutch were the first colonial power to broadcast to their colonies starting in 1927, with France and Britain following in 1931. Then we have the second stage, which spans between 1934 and 1939 and is used as the formative years. TUSA identifies 2 contrasting values. The BBC represented the idealistic strand, and they were producing programs in the interest of mankind. Then we had Radio Moscow, which represented the ideological strand. They were anti-capitalist and they distributed propaganda. Nazi Germany launched the Rundfunk Ausland, the foreign radio section, on 1 April 1935. And this is now when we lead to the third stage between 1939 and 1945, incidentally, the same 6 years of World War II. And this really establishes international radio broadcasting. It became a key instrument in international political communication. The USA established the Voice of America via the Office of War Information in 1942. We had several famous propaganda broadcasters like Lord Haha, William Joyce in English language and Germany, Axis Sally, who was Mildred Gillis, who broadcast to troops in North Africa, Tokyo Rose, who was Ava Toguri d'Aquino, who broadcast to American troops in the Pacific. Then we have 1945 to 1992, which is often considered the Cold War era. After the Second World War, the US and the UK wanted to scale down international radio broadcasting, while the USSR expanded Radio Moscow. The CIA-backed Radio Free Europe and Radio Liberty were then created. BBC and Voice of America adapted their content for newly independent African and Asian nations. Radio Moscow's listenership in those regions then plummeted because Moscow failed to deal with African events, cultures, and personalities. And then we have the fifth period, and I'm sure by now, since the study guide was written, we might have a sixth period as well. But yes, 1992 to present, post-Cold War and web radio. The collapse of communism in the early 1990s forced RRB stations to rethink their purpose. Web radio emerged in 1995, Voice of America went online in 1994, BBC followed suit in 2001. Services were also cut back. Areas of instability in Asia, Africa, and Eastern Europe still rely on Voice of America, BBC World Service, and Deutsche Welle. Clark and Werder argue that international radio broadcasting should be studied as a system, not just its individual parts, but the dynamic interactions between those parts. This model has three purposes: to explain organizational structure, to explore changes over time, and to advance a new approach to analyzing media organizations. The model has four key characteristics. Firstly, hierarchical ordering. Every system has a unique hierarchy of subsystems and supersystems. In international radio broadcasting, subsystems are the departments within the station, news programming, audience research, while the supersystem is the government and its funding agencies. And then we have interdependence. There is a mutual cause and effect relationship between the parts. A change in one part creates a chain reaction. Example, the US government cuts the Voice of America budget. The Voice of America cuts broadcasts to certain countries. The audience in those countries is affected. And we see this currently happening. Next up, we have permeability. The boundaries of system parts are not watertight. Information can flow in and out. The system responds to modifications in its environment, not the environment itself. An example is the end of apartheid in South Africa led to Radio RSA being renamed Channel Africa and severely curtailing its regions that were served. And finally, we have feedback. There are two types of feedback: corrective feedback, which maintains the system, for example, fixing a poor signal, and positive feedback, which enhances growth and development, for example, diversifying programming based on audience response. Now let's look at four major international radio broadcasting stations covered in this unit. The first is the BBC World Service. It was founded in 1932 as the BBC Empire Service, and it was aimed at expatriates in the outposts of the British Empire, so the colonies. An Arabic service was added in January 1938. German program started in 1939. During the Second World War, it became famous as an alternative news source for audiences in enemy and occupied territories, who often listened in secret. Today, it's the world's largest international radio service. It is politically independent but funded via the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office. From 2014, funding shifted to the annual TV license fee. Station identification: it's 4 bars of the Lilliburlero, a traditional Irish air that was arranged for orchestra by Henry Purcell in 1689, and that was introduced during World War II. Voice of America is a product of Second World War. It was established in 1942 via the Office of War Information after the attack on Pearl Harbor. It's considered the official spokesman of the United States in the international arena. The Voice of America Charter was signed into law by President Gerald Ford on 12 July 1976. According to Itaro, Voice of America features two major flaws. Firstly, its content bias. News is seen as smug and paternalistic toward the developing world. This is intrinsically American, you can say. And then content control tension. Voice of America must serve its government while also providing unbiased news. The Voice of Russia, Radio Moscow, began as Radio Moscow in 1922. Then Soviet external propaganda was described as the fourth pillar of foreign policy, alongside diplomacy, the armed forces, and the economy. All programs were scripted and had to be cleared by a program directorate. This created dull and rigid programming. In 1991, it was replaced by with a song. So it had a very well-known song that was sort of the station ID, which was changed only in 1991. The Voice of America today, the Voice of Russia, excuse me, has 109 million listeners in 160 countries using 38 languages. And then Channel Africa began as Radio RSA on the 1st of May 1966. Its purpose was to counter negative international images of apartheid South Africa. So it was defensive counter propaganda. It was operated by the SABC but funded by the Department of Foreign Affairs. It was renamed Channel Africa on 1 October 1992 to distance itself from the apartheid era. Now it's integrated into the SABC. Shortwave transmissions are now limited to Africa, only broadcasting in English, French, and Portuguese. Boyd and Brown identify 10 functions of international radio broadcasting. Number one, it acts as an instrument of foreign policy and diplomacy. Two, it's a mirror of society, national life, and prestige. Three, it is a symbolic presence in target areas. Four, it converts and sustains target audiences toward a particular ideology. Five, it can coerce and intimidate. Six, it educates audiences on national and international issues. Seven, it entertains. We have comedy shows, sports, cooking, movies. Number 8 is that it is a seller of goods and a promoter of commercial interests, which links directly to number 9, consumerism, but also cultural imperialism. And 10th, it creates cultural ties with the diaspora and allies. It's unlikely that all 10 functions will be present in any one station, but it's generally always a mix of some. On diplomacy, Cohen identifies 4 specific relationships between international radio broadcasting and diplomacy. Firstly, IRB provides a source of information to diplomats. Its agenda-setting function influences foreign policy. IRB serves as a channel of communication among policymakers. 3, IRB can be used as a negotiation device, especially where no formal diplomatic relations exist. And finally, IRB is used to gain public support abroad for particular policies. But we have a paradox. International radio broadcasting must be objective. That is a journalistic principle. But it's funded by the government, which is a propaganda function. So this tension is then best illustrated by the Voice of America, which must serve the sitting administration while also providing unbiased news to the world. These roles cannot always be harmonized. So 2 key technologies dominate international radio broadcasting. Firstly, shortwave radio, which has always been valued for covering vast geographic areas at relatively low cost and with no infrastructure required. Authorities in target countries cannot censor shortwave broadcasts or determine who is listening. It is still available in developing countries where the internet access is limited. However, shortwave suffers from atmospheric interference, frequency overcrowding, and audio quality far inferior to FM. Growth in shortwave use during the 1920s is compared by the text to internet growth in the 1990s. Web radio began in earnest in 1995. The Voice of America went online in 1994, technically before the web radio era, and BBC followed in 2001. The World Radio Network was established in 1991 to promote the shift from shortwave. By 1998, web radio quality was equivalent to medium wave broadcasts. The numbers are dramatic. In 1995, there were 19 stations on WRN. In 1996, 178, and by 1998, there were 1,550 stations. However, we see a catch-22, because by catering to online audiences, the haves, you risk alienating those without internet, and those are the have-nots. Moana's 8 factors that influences IRB effectiveness. These appear in the summary and can be asked of you in MCQs and in assessments. So these 8 factors that influence international radio broadcasting effectiveness are geographic distribution of receivers, the purpose of the broadcast, technical capacity, financial capacity, the regulation of broadcasting. ITU allocates shortwave frequencies and older stations generally have better ones. World events and crises, the ideology of the broadcaster, and the geographic environment. For example, lightning interference in Southern Africa summers. Now we move on to film. So film was invented in the 1890s as part of the Industrial Revolution. Alongside the telephone, which was invented in 1876, the gramophone in 1877, and the automobile, which we saw developed between the 1880s and 1890s. So here are a list of some key early milestones. In the 1870s, Edward Muybridge conducted certain photographic experiments in California. And this was sort of seen as the entrance to film. Thomas Edison built on this work and he developed the kinetoscope, a peephole device that displayed film to one person at a time via a coin-operated box. In 1895, the Lumiere brothers from France invented the cinematograph, a projector that projected film onto a large screen for an audience. A similar system was developed simultaneously by Robert Paul in London. That same year, Thomas Armat developed the Vitascope, which was marketed under Edison's name, and the machine from which the modern cinema projector derives. Its Broadway premiere was a huge success. Then we see the emergence of Nickelodeons. These were converted arcades and shops that charged a nickel for entry. Silent films were particularly popular among immigrants because they used the universal language of images and it required no specific language knowledge. In 1915, we saw the first full-length film called Birth of a Nation, directed by W.D. Griffith. It was extremely impressive for its time, although the topic today is really not cool. It used outdoor battle scenes, close-ups, widescreen shots, and action shots. By the 1920s, Hollywood was born as filmmakers moved to Southern California. We see the emergence of the major studios. At that time, United Artists, Paramount, MGM, 20th Century Fox, Warner Brothers, Universal, Columbia, and RKO. The talkies, which literally means film with dialogue, arrived in 1927, and the US theater attendance jumped from 57 million to 95 million in a span of 2 years. However, when the Great Depression hit by 1932, a third of theaters closed and 5 of the 8 major studios went bankrupt or were in serious financial trouble. The 1930s and 40s are considered the golden age, where we see classics like Citizen Kane and Gone with the Wind being produced with stars like Bette Davis, Humphrey Bogart, and Greta Garbo. Why did American film dominate globally, particularly so early? World War I crippled the European film industries and it created a vacuum that Hollywood filled. By 1925, American films had 95% of the British market, 70% of the French market, and 68% of the Italian market. American distributors could sell their products more cheaply than local producers. After the Second World War, Hollywood was forced to look overseas as antitrust rulings dismantled its domestic monopoly. By 1969, US film manufacturers relied on overseas markets for approximately half of their income. There are several key structural reasons for Hollywood's dominance. First is the vertical integration, which was basically control from the studio to the distribution to the screening. We saw the SARS system, and which was a massive marketing apparatus. There was a lot of US government subsidies for film distribution because it recognized its propaganda value. Then we had the Webb-Pomerene Export Act of 1918. US companies could collaborate for export trade. Antitrust rules only applied domestically. Then we had trade associations, especially the MPA, MPAA, negotiated with foreign governments to remove trade restrictions. Multiplexes were created worldwide, and they exported the American film-going experience. And then we have mega conglomerates, the 6 giants that earned a combined revenue of $130 billion by 2001. And day-and-date releases. Some simultaneous global openings, like Spider-Man 3, launched in 75 countries on exactly the same day in 2007, and it earned $230 million in under a week. In today's industry, we see 6 major studios, and that has now changed again since 2017 when this study guide was updated. Each produces 15 to 20 films annually. So Hollywood films, we see about 450 Hollywood films a year. This will also look differently now with streamers like HBO and particularly Netflix producing their own films now. DVD was launched in 1997, that was huge. By 2001, it led to 9 billion in sales. Netflix launched in 1997, and it was basically a form at that point it was a way by which you could rent DVDs. But it's changed completely, obviously, now. So by 2008, it stocked 55 million discs. It mailed 2 million discs daily to people to rent. Now, Netflix is something completely different. The average cost of a mass audience film in 1918, it cost $14 million to make. Today, it costs over $100 million. Well, that was 2006. I don't even know what it is today. The MPAA was founded in 1922. The MPA, which was its international arm, has offices in Brussels, Singapore, Sao Paulo, Mexico City, and Toronto. And there are in 2012, the global box office reached $34.7 billion. So that is just an idea of what Hollywood film looks like today. But we see two extremely important alternative film industries challenging Hollywood's global dominance. And importantly, they are both in the developing world. Firstly, we have Bollywood from India, and it refers informally to the Hindi language film industry based in Mumbai, formerly known as Bombay. It is the largest film producer in India and the largest production center in the world. The industry began almost simultaneously with Hollywood in Europe, interestingly enough. Imported films were screened in 1896 already. The first silent feature film was made in 1913, and by the 1930s, the industry was producing over 200 films per year. The arrival of talkies brought music, and that became a defining characteristic of Bollywood films. Films of the 1930s and 40s were shamelessly escapist, this mix of music, romance, extravaganza, and melodrama. From 1970s onwards, we see masala films, multi-generic entertainment extravaganzas, which became the standard format. An important note, the term Bollywood is disliked by industry members because it implies inferiority to Hollywood. Today, Bollywood films reach global audiences, from the Indian diaspora in the US and UK to Syrians and Senegalese. It has influenced global cinema. Examples include Moulin Rouge and Slumdog Millionaire. Then we have Nollywood from Nigeria. The Nigerian video film industry is described as one of the most exciting developments in African mass media. Despite Nigeria suffering under civil war and military dictators for decades, a multi-million-dollar film industry emerged after the country became a democracy in 1999, even though Nigeria had virtually no movie theaters. This led to a video-based cinema industry. Films were initially shot on video cassettes, then moved to digital cameras and computer editing. By 2008, Nigeria had around 300 production companies, releasing over 200 new DVD titles per week. Between 2008 and 2010, approximately 7,500 titles were produced, generating around $800 million in revenue. In 2009, UNESCO reported that Nigeria overtook the United States in film production volume, while also closing the gap on India. Nollywood is the world's third largest film industry after Bollywood and Nollywood. The regulatory body is the National Films and Videos Censors Board in Nigeria. And that provides employment, and not just the board, but the whole of Nollywood provides employment for thousands of people. So let's summarize the key points that you need to remember for Learning Unit 3. There are 9 types of international radio broadcasting, but we focus primarily on type 1, which is state-funded. We also see that there are 144 government-supported versus 18 NGO stations. It's important to know the 5 different international radio broadcasting historical periods. Always remember the systems model by Clark and Varder and its 4 characteristics: hierarchy, interdependence, permeability, and feedback. Then you can look at the BBC World Service, at the VOA Charter, at the Voice of Russia. Remember Moana's 8 international radio broadcasting factors. And then when we get to film, why does Hollywood dominate? And who is the biggest competition for Hollywood? That is Bollywood and Nollywood. Thanks for joining and listening to this class, watching this class rather. We will have summaries of study unit 4 to 7 coming up later.